It's the week before Christmas, the busiest traveling season of the year for American Airlines. All across the nation, travelers are making their way home for the holidays, and millions of Americans are currently either in the air or waiting their turn to board the next flight. Somewhere in the American Midwest, a family approaches a check-in counter to get their boarding passes, but as the ticket agent checks their names in the online passenger registry, there's a mistake. The family's names simply aren't there. The family, now growing worried, shows the ticket agent their email receipt along with the confirmation number. The agent checks the number, which rings true, except the passengers assigned that number aren't the ones currently asking to receive their boarding passes. 2 ticket counters down, the same mistake is happening, and at another airline, yet another family and ticket agent are going through the same issue. Inside the airport proper itself, TSA agents are checking boarding passes and passenger IDs. As one of the TSA agents swipes a passenger's boarding pass, he's surprised to discover that this middle-aged mother of 3 is on the government officials' no-fly list. Even more troubling, she's actually been listed as wanted by government agencies for making terror threats. The suburban mother of 3 is led away in handcuffs, bewildered and proclaiming her innocence, as her family is held in a separate holding area by airport security. 15 minutes later, another passenger is flagged as no-fly and also wanted for making terror threats, this time an elderly man of 75. In another terminal, the exact same scenario is playing out, and then repeating itself in a second airport a few hundred miles away. The FAA, responsible for all civilian traffic in the US, very quickly realizes that something is wrong. What started as an isolated incident in a remote Midwest airport has quickly spread across the nation. Now hundreds and soon thousands of passengers have been falsely flagged as no-flyers or as wanted for making terror threats. Tens of thousands of travelers are having their boarding passes denied due to what seems to be computer error. Within the next hour, that number will double. An emergency alert reaches the offices of the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Defense's U.S. Cyber Command nearly simultaneously. Within minutes, the president's been alerted. American domestic airlines and airports have been targeted by a massive cyber attack, and even more troubling is the fact that they seem to have penetrated the report and alerting systems of the Department of Homeland Security itself. Lacking a centralized cyber command structure, the U.S. government reels as it tries to coordinate a response to the attack. Amidst the busiest traveling season of the year, each cyber agency pursuing its own agenda. Inside a gas-fired power plant deep in Minnesota, a few dozen lines of malicious code knock the temperature monitoring and control and the gas injection systems of the gas turbines offline. Unknown to the plant's operators, more gas is being mixed into the stream of air that enters the turbine, causing larger combustion events. Just a few minutes later, the first turbine explodes, critically damaging its neighbors, which very quickly go offline as well. Across a corner of Minnesota, thousands of homes lose power, and along with their power, their heating as well. The icy chill of a below-zero Minnesota winter grips the occupants of the affected homes as the gas plant operators survey the wreckage. The plant's 4 gas turbines are completely destroyed. It will take weeks before the plant is back online. Similar events begin to occur in natural gas power plants across the country, all in rapid succession. Whoever has perpetrated the cyber attack knows that they have to move quickly, or else their malicious code can be automatically discovered and fixed by vigilant cybersecurity tools. 45% of the US's natural gas plants, all of them lacking critical security updates to software, are knocked offline, causing approximately 16% of the nation to lose power. Along with power, millions of homes have now lost heating as well, and all this in the grip of the middle of winter. In the skies above a United States caught in the grip of a cyber Pearl Harbor, an airliner filled with 187 passengers experiences what seems to be an instrument malfunction. Descending for a landing through turbulent winter weather, the plane is using its precision approach and landing system to see digitally through the terrible exterior conditions. Breaking through the clouds and icy fog, the pilots are horrified to discover that the GPS signals they've been relying on to guide their descent have been inaccurate by several hundred feet. The pilots struggled to bring the plane up out of its descent, but conditions on the ground were so terrible that the plane only got a good visual on the ground from barely 1,000 feet up. With a fiery explosion, an entire passenger liner goes up in flames. Similar incidents are happening all across the nation, though thankfully weather is clear enough for pilots to correct their descents in the majority of cases. Only 2 other planes are lost due to the mysterious glitch, though a corruption of a plane's navigation system causes one other airliner to fly out into the Atlantic Ocean, believing itself to still be on approach to airports on the East Coast. By the time the mistake is discovered by the crew, it's too late, and the plane does not have the fuel needed to return to the mainland. Coast Guard vessels are dispatched in advance, though none believe anyone will survive the crash into stormy winter seas. In the waters of the Gulf of Mexico, though, almost 2,000 oil platforms are pumping away 24 hours a day, bringing tens of thousands of barrels of oil to the surface from deep beneath the sea. Hundreds of these platforms are struck simultaneously with malicious code, similar to the type used to attack American natural gas plants. Pressure sensors are disabled, and as the wells continue to pump unchecked, hundreds of them suffer catastrophic bursts or breaks in their piping. Millions of gallons of oil begin to spill unchecked into the American Gulf, causing the worst maritime ecological disaster in human history. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill would eventually release 4.9 million barrels of oil into the environment, but this massive disaster will end up releasing over triple that amount before the last of the wellhead breaches are sealed in the following weeks. Marine life in the Gulf of Mexico will die in record numbers, and the federal government, along with the government of Mexico and other Central and Southern American nations, issue a decade-long moratorium on fishing in an effort to allow the Gulf's dwindling wildlife to restore itself. The economic damage to the United States from the fishing moratorium will run into the hundreds of billions over the course of the 10-year ban. Though more immediately, with 17% of U.S. oil production coming from the Gulf, the disaster will skyrocket global oil prices and force the United States to rely much more heavily on foreign oil. This inevitably drives the United States even closer to a Saudi Arabia that it's been trying to distance itself from for the last decade over the nation's human rights abuses record, and Saudi Arabia in turn uses the opportunity to strike out at its regional rival, Iran. The US and Iran are thus perched on the precipice of a new war, secretly being manipulated by the Saudi government, which is blackmailing the US into doing its dirty work for it. Just 24 hours after the start of what's now being officially called Cyber Pearl Harbor, casualties are already streaming into hospital emergency rooms due to the effect of extreme cold on millions of Americans left without power or heating. The first casualties are the very young and elderly, yet as the days carry on, more and more Americans will need medical attention as they're forced to endure extreme cold winter temperatures. With a massive interruption to U.S. oil production, the diesel generators that hospitals in the affected areas are relying on to operate are starting to run out of what's very quickly becoming expensive fuel. The U.S. military is dispatched to assist in humanitarian missions across the affected areas, and the strategic oil reserve is tapped for the first time in over a decade. For many, though, it will be too late, and tens of thousands of the most vulnerable, the sick, the elderly, and the young, have already succumbed to the cold. To make matters worse, the attack against airport cyber infrastructure has stranded 100,000 travelers in airports all across the U.S. Unable to verify the identities of individuals digitally, a painstaking analog method must be implemented as travel reservations and flight clearances are sorted. Hundreds of planes have been grounded, though, due to the attack on navigation systems, and some airlines have seen their entire fleet grounded pending emergency fixes. The fixes will take time, though, and it'll be weeks before the U.S. air fleet is once more in the sky in force. The stranded travelers will themselves take a week or more to make their way home, further adding to the strain on communities rocked by the gas plant attacks and an economy nosediving from the disruption of oil production in the American Gulf. Just 2 days later, an attack on the nation's financial systems brings down the banking services across 18% of the U.S.'s banks. Wall Street panics as the nation comes under attack and stock prices plummet. Fortunes are lost overnight, and blue-chip companies such as Microsoft and Apple take losses in the hundreds of millions. A new Great Depression dawns on America as panicked Americans rush to banks and withdraw their money, collapsing the national banking system. The previous scenario is clearly fictional, but it's a picture of what may be possibly in store for America or another nation as the world becomes ever more dependent on digital infrastructure. For now, an attack on such a massive scale, targeting so many different digital networks, would be impossible, as such an attack would require the coordination of a vast array of cyber assets and the development of an equal number of specialized cyber weapons. Neither of those two could be carried out by any nation without intelligence services of another nation discovering it. Famously, the US and Israel's Stuxnet virus attacks against Iran's nuclear program were many times nearly discovered by accident, and that was only a single cyber weapon in a single offensive cyber operation. For now, the previous scenario remains in the realm of fantasy, but the grim reality is such that an event is extremely possible in the very near future, and the consequences would be just as disastrous as those in our hypothetical Cyber Pearl Harbor, if not worse. For almost 8 decades, the world has kept its precarious balance on the edge of a nuclear war thanks to the concept of MAD, or mutually assured destruction. In essence, MAD is boiled down to, if you fire your nukes, I'll detect it and fire off my nukes. Since nobody likes having nuclear weapons rain down on their heads, nobody ever fired off an ICBM at their enemy. Yet, cyber weapons are far more subtle and difficult to detect than a nuclear weapon. By their very nature, they can make it difficult to even discover who launched an attack in the first place after one takes place. This can embolden nations or even individuals and terrorist groups to launch ambitious attacks in order to subvert their foes. In fact, the seeds of such an attack have already been planted around the world, and it's well known that Russian agents have penetrated the systems of many US power plants, with the United States having returned the favor in kind. In a recent testimony to Congress, a Department of Defense official stated that the cyber realm is the only warfighting domain that the US does not enjoy a large advantage in. Here in the United States, defensive and offensive capabilities are pretty much on par with those of China, Russia, and even Iran. To make matters worse, nearly a quarter of all cybersecurity jobs in the US are unfilled due to a lack of qualified candidates, and those that are filled oftentimes have individuals who are not qualified for the job. Clearly, the US is vulnerable to such a cyber Pearl Harbor, and the fear today and for our foreseeable future remains. What if someone becomes bold enough to attempt the attack? Do you think a digital Pearl Harbor is inevitable? Should the US be spending more on cybersecurity? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, then check out how the US attacked Iran digitally in the virus that saved the world from nuclear Iran. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content.